How can a short, 20-minute film do more than just document a war? How does it actually become the foundational myth for an entire nation? Well, that's what we're diving into today. We are deconstructing Zahir Rayhan's 1971 documentary, Stop Genocide. It's a film that didn't just record a historical trauma, it actively used that trauma to forge a brand new national identity. Okay, let's get into it.
So the film doesn't open with images of war. It opens with this quote from Lenin. Now, right off the bat, this throws you for a loop, right? It's a signal. This is not going to be some neutral, objective documentary. This thing is a political manifesto, an urgent ideological statement from the very first frame. It's basically making the case for the right to secede before it even shows you why secession is necessary.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start wide with the historical context and then narrow our focus right down to the specific, kind of weird filmmaking techniques being used. From there, we'll unpack the film's deeper argument about nationhood and gender, and then we'll pull back out to look at its lasting legacy.
Okay, first up, to really get this film, you have to get the crisis it was born from. The year is 1971. The Bangladesh Liberation War is raging. The director, Zahir Rayhan, he's not just making a movie. No, he's on a desperate mission to get the world to pay attention to the atrocities being committed by the Pakistani army. I mean, just look at the speed of this thing. Rayhan is traveling through active war zones. He's filming, and he edits this entire 20-minute documentary in less than 2 months. That's insane. This is not art for art's sake. This is communication under fire. And its impact was, well, immediate. When it was shown to Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she apparently ordered it to be distributed worldwide. This was a piece of propaganda, in the truest sense, designed to get international intervention. And you know what? It worked.
So that incredible speed and that massive political impact, that was not an accident. It was the direct result of the philosophy behind the film. And to really get Rayhan's methods, you've got to understand he wasn't trying to make art for a gallery. He was forging a weapon. He was part of a revolutionary movement in filmmaking.
He was a practitioner of what's known as third cinema. It's a movement that sees film not as entertainment, but as a tool for political and cultural revolution. So if you think of Hollywood as first cinema and European art house films as second cinema, then third cinema is the cinema of the oppressed. It's the cinema of liberation.
And this basically lays out the mindset perfectly. For these filmmakers, the camera isn't some passive observer. It's a weapon. It's a tool for shooting back at the oppressor. The filmmaker isn't an artist. They're a guerrilla fighter, creating what they themselves called unfinished, unordered, violent works. The goal? Pure documentation, used as an act of resistance.
So, if third cinema is the revolutionary mission statement, what were the actual tactics on the ground? How did Rayhan actually weaponize his camera? Well, he reached into the toolbox of a German playwright, a guy named Bertolt Brecht, and he pulled out all these techniques designed not to comfort the audience, but to confront them. They're called Brechtian alienation effects. And the whole point, the whole reason for them is to constantly remind you that you are watching a film, that this is a construction. By interrupting that emotional flow, it yanks you out of any kind of passive trance and forces your brain to actually engage with the political argument that's being made.
And here's exactly how Rayhan does it. He uses these jarring freeze frames that just stop the action dead in its tracks. A narrator reads out the text from a telegram, and he literally says the word stop at the end of a sentence. He plays the sound of barking dogs over images of dead bodies. It's a mismatch that is just deeply unsettling. And he makes these huge, over-the-top comparisons, calling General Yahya Khan worse than Hitler, not for historical accuracy, but for pure, unadulterated shock value.
Now this is where we get to the real core of this whole thing. Because all these unsettling techniques, they serve a second, much more profound purpose. The film isn't just documenting a war crime. It is arguing that the shared experience of this genocide is the very foundation of the new nation of Bangladesh. And the proof is right there in the title cards. Stop Genocide is explicitly labeled Part 1. And what was Rayhan's very next film? A State is Born, which begins with a title card that says Part 2. He was consciously, deliberately constructing a two-part epic. Part 1, the trauma of genocide. Part 2, the birth of the state that rises from that very trauma.
So, the crucial point here, based on scholar Mario Herstein's analysis, is this. The film intentionally frames the massacre as the national origin story.
It's not just an atrocity that needs to be stopped, it's the primal, foundational event that actually gives birth to Bangladesh.
But if you're gonna build a national story, you have to decide who gets to be the hero. And this is the most critical part of Herstein's argument. The new Bangladeshi identity that was forged by this film, well, it was built on a very strict and frankly very problematic division of gender roles.
Just look at this comparison, which is drawn directly from the film's imagery. Men are active. They're freedom fighters, they're the protectors. They're shown in training camps, getting ready for battle. Women, on the other hand, are portrayed as completely passive. They're survivors, victims, the voiceless bearers of the nation's suffering. They're never, ever shown in combat.
And that voicelessness, it's literal. The narrator, who is Raihan himself, describes this really chilling moment with a traumatized 11-year-old girl. He says, quote, "I approached her, threw her nearer, and tried to make her talk. I tried again and again." The camera, as a weapon, is suddenly turned on the victim, trying to physically force a story out of her.
And that just forces us to ask this deeply uncomfortable question. At what point does the need to document a tragedy cross the line and become a violation of the survivor's trauma itself? The filmmaker's insistence, it highlights this profound ethical dilemma that's right at the heart of the project.
And look, this wasn't just a choice for one film. This portrayal, it became a foundational trope that would echo for decades. When you cast men as the sole active heroes and women as the silent, suffering body of the nation right at its birth, you're not just making a movie, you are embedding a narrative deep into the cultural DNA. It ends up shaping how an entire nation remembers its own history and who it sees as the architects of its freedom.
So let's zoom back out one last time. What does this all mean? Well, the film gives us a really powerful case study in how nations choose to remember their own origins, and how those choices can shape a culture for generations to come.
So to sum up Mario Hirstein's argument, Stop Genocide just can't be seen as a simple documentary. It's all of these things at once. It's a historical record, it's a political weapon, it's a deeply gendered story about nation building, and it's a powerful act of post-colonial resistance. It's an incredibly complex and layered cultural artifact.
And all of that leaves us with one final, big question to think about. If a nation is founded on a narrative of trauma, who gets to control that narrative? Who gets cast as the hero? Who gets cast as the victim? And what parts of the story get left out? It's a question that goes way beyond one 20-minute film from 1971, and it really speaks to how all nations choose to remember their past.